everyone. Today I thought I'd throw together something a little different, some tips on how to minimize mistakes when playing Marvel Champions. So everybody I know makes a lot of mistakes when playing this game, and by mistakes, of course there are rules mistakes that people make, but what I mean in this case are just you know what to do, you just don't do it because you forget. So it's more like forgetfulness rather than mistakes, but they're still, the result is a mistake in the game when you're playing. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate some of the different ways, basically tokens, that I use in order to keep track of it. Now, you don't have to use these tokens. In fact, I would expect most people would use different tokens for each thing. I'm just going to show you what I use to give you ideas for things that maybe you could use instead. So let's go ahead and start with Magneto. Magneto is going to provide a number of examples for us. So let's take a look at Magneto's armor. So if we look here, let's move that over. If we look here, we can see that Magneto's armor is based on his ability. So let's actually start with his ability. He has a magnetic pull ability. Action, discard cards from the top of your deck until a magnetic card is discarded. Add that card to your hand. Well, what Magneto's armor does is, after resolve the magnetic pull ability, if you discarded at least one of the following resource icons, you get some bonuses, right? So if it's a mental resource icon, you get +1 thwart this round. If it's a physical resource icon, Magneto gets +1 attack this round. And if it's an energy icon, Magneto gets +1 defense this round. So how do I keep track of this? So for me, I purchased a set of dice. I'll just kind of show you an example of them. But you could use any dice. I happen to like the fact that these had pluses and minuses on them, so that's why I bought these. And they're just regular old 6-sided dice other than the pluses and minuses on them. And so if I want to track that, I'll just use some of these dice, right? They're just regular old 6-sided dice otherwise. So I have some out already. So let's suppose I use Magneto's ability, and I discarded, one of the cards I discarded had a mental resource, and maybe another one that I discarded had an energy resource. So for the mental resource, I know that that's +1 thwart. So I would stick my +1 right there. And then and I actually just keep these +1 dice right on the card ready to go. And then, so +1 to thwart. And then for the energy resource, +1 to his defense. So I know he has that for the rest of the round. For the next example, let's take the magnetic bubble. So let's say you have this in play. So this gives Magneto Retaliate 1, and it also has a Forced Interrupt, but let's start with the Retaliate 1. So in the beginning, what I used to do to represent Retaliate 1 was a damage token, which I'd better introduce you to my tokens because they're different than the ones that come with the game. So I basically, my tokens were super worn out. So I have these other tokens. So these are actually my threat tokens and my damage tokens. So I have all these new tokens here. And so what I used to do to represent that was just put a little, I would just put a little damage token on me. So on here it wouldn't do any good because that's where you want to keep track of your damage. Well, I guess you could track it with different types of tokens. But I'd usually put it right on my dial so that when I get attacked, I go, oh, that's right, I have Retaliate. So I'll be able to retaliate. And then the other thing that I might do is go, I don't really necessarily want to remember that I have 6 here. So I had those minus dice as well. So I might come over here and take one of my minus dice, and I can take up to 6 damage here. So I could put a little 6 here knowing, hey, I can take up to 6 damage. So the purpose of that isn't necessarily really to keep track of the 6. What I had trouble with was remembering when I have all my different supports and my upgrades out, remembering all the different things that I could do, and my mind just didn't want to every single time look at every single thing that I had. So if I just kind of at a glance I see this extra 3-dimensional type of item on here, like a die, then it would trigger for me. It's like, oh yeah, I can prevent 6 of that damage. So now I have the ability with these minus dice to keep track of something like that. I also use the minus dice for healing, by the way, so I might as well go to that next. So for example, here's Med Team. So if Med Team allows you, you have some different counters on it. So these are my special counters that I have for my tokens. And so 3 medical counters. and exhaust med team and remove 1 medical counter from it. Heal 2 damage from your character. This one may not be the hardest one to remember. However, if I put a -2 on it, I know, oh, each one of these represents healing 2. All right, and let's go to one more item for Magneto, and that would be Magneto's cape. So that's another thing that I might forget, is something like this. So response: after you resolve your magnetic pull ability, exhaust Magneto's cape and ready Magneto. Right? So you can, you have his ability here. Let's say you've already attacked, and if you use the magnetic pull ability, discarding cards, well, after you resolve your magnetic pull ability, and you do have to resolve it, you have to have added a card to your hand, then I know that I have to do this. So what symbol do I use? Well, I have again, I mentioned that I've upgraded my tokens. So these are the old tokens, and these are my new versions with the +1s on them. So since I'm already using these, that means I have all these spare tokens that I can use. So I just put this on here, and that represents for me, it's 2 different things that tends to represent. So I'll show you the first one, which is this one. Oh, I use this token to represent I can ready my hero. Okay. Now, if you don't have that, which almost, most people wouldn't have these spare tokens, extra tokens lying around like that, then you could use something generic. So for example, what I would have done early on was something more budget. So I might take, say, a piece of paper and put a little, say, arrow thing on it like this, right? A little curly arrow thing on it. Okay. And then, cut it out or something, but I'll just tear it. And then this would be what represents that for me. It looks kind of like a G there, but it's supposed to be like a circle with an arrow. Okay, and so I can see that, oh, this is the thing that represents, okay, so I know that this gives me the ability to ready, it would be like this, right? This gives me the ability to ready my hero. So let's move on to something else. Let's say Spider-Man. So I just got finished playing a bunch of games with Spider-Man, but this is the Peter Parker Spider-Man. Oops, I'll grab that later. So Peter Parker, let's start actually on his alter ego side. Okay? So he has this ability. So one of the things I tend to forget regularly are to use the abilities that are on the alter ego side. So that one is generate a mental resource. So what do I do for that? I just use something simple, and that is I just put this and I keep it on, I'll keep it on him on this side too, but I keep it on him at all times, and I know, oh, that's right, there's something special here. Oh, mental resource. So once I use that mental resource, I just drag it off to the side, representing that I've used it. So let's go on to the one that I definitely forget the most, though, for Peter Parker. Excuse me, for his Spider-Man, because this is on his hero side, and that's his Spider Sense, which is an interrupt. When the villain initiates an attack against you, draw 1 card. So I used to get really frustrated playing Spider-Man. I never did well with him, and part of the reason I didn't do well with him in the beginning is because drawing extra cards is a hugely powerful ability, but if you don't use it, it's not very good. And so I would forget all the time. So to this day, I use a very low budget way to track it. I actually keep this in here, so when I store my cards away, I keep this little note right there that says draw, and when I go to play them, I bring that out, and here's how I remember to draw. So I put this so here's an example encounter deck for the villain, and I just put it on top of that encounter deck. So when the villain is attacking, as soon as the villain attacks, well, I know that I'm going to have to flip the top card, right? After I flip the top card, I'm trying to see, oh, does the villain get some bonus damage that they're going to do to me? So, but the draw symbol is there, so I immediately first draw my own card, then I can go ahead and flip the villain's bonus damage. All right, let's go ahead and get to the other. So I mentioned that I use these, and in this case, I had that other one drawn, so there's an alternative, okay? And that is for something like Avengers Mansion. So I used to always forget to use this to draw an extra card. Again, if it's out there all by itself, I don't forget. But once I start getting a bunch of supports and upgrades out, I start, not noticing things. So for me, this is that symbol. If a person wanted to do it cheaply, right, they could have a symbol like this, and that makes me notice at the beginning of my turn, oh yes, I see that little symbol there. I am going to use this to draw a card. So that's the other thing I use that for. So I tend to use this symbol or this symbol for readying, to represent readying a hero, and also to represent an extra ability to draw an extra card. Okay, so this time let's look at the Magneto villain. So one of the things that Magneto has the ability to do at some point in the game, he has a card that's like his own magnetic bubble card. I'm not going to bother getting that out, but it gives him as well where he can get retaliate. So again, the way I represent that is I would put the retaliate damage right on the villain's dial that tracks their life. So then that way, when I go to attack the villain, I know I take damage. By the way, if you're wanting some upgrades, this is from Buy the Same Token. So this is a retaliate one. And Buy the Same Token has all kinds of them. And I'm going to show you another one right here, actually. So, and I'm not sponsored by them or anything. These are just, ones that I purchased because I thought they would be very helpful. So they also have a When Defeated token. This one to represent extra encounter cards. They have this one to represent that situation when you're not allowed to thwart or take any threat off of the main scheme. And they also have guard, which the guard one I want to come back to. They have villainous. They have stalwart. So these are all very useful. But the guard one I want to come back to. So let's suppose you have, in fact, I'll go ahead and find one of the minions that has guard. All right, so Magneto's villain deck, he has the M-type Sentinel, and they have guard. So you might think that a person might put guard here, but the guard isn't guarding himself. He's guarding the villain. So I actually put it here, because then if I go to attack the villain, I see this guard symbol. Now, what happens to me all the time is I've already defeated the Sentinel, and I go to attack, and I see the guard there. But then I just check, oh, that's right. The minion that had guard is no longer there, so I can remove this token. But it does its job by being there. All right, and then another type of thing I tend to forget is an ability like that on the Triskelion, which is increase your ally limit by 1. So now you can have, because normally you're limited to 3 allies at the most, and so this way you could have a 4th one. Well, that was another thing that I would forget when I would have, so I would again go back to my plus minus dice and just stick a +1 on there, and I know it represents +1 to something. So I could put it on the Triskelion, and I know it represents +1 ally that I can have. But if instead, let's say we're playing an aggression, I have boot camp, and that when each ally you control gets +1 attack, if I put a +1 on boot camp, it represents +1 attack for everybody. Again, you would think that a person could remember that by just having the card out near their allies or something, but nope, at least not for me. And I think this is an issue for lots of people because just you get so many supports and upgrades out and you just can't track it all. So adding a little 3D-ness to a card just makes it so much more noticeable. And then here's actually another situation where I would use that. So first of all, this isn't enough for me, just seeing this symbol to know I have an acceleration token. So I do actually put an acceleration token on this so that, again, it gives that 3D ability so I know, and of course for most of you that would be this token instead. So it's just really noticeable and make sure that I actually apply the acceleration token. But on top of it, this card has its own ability. Claw gets +10 hit points. So to represent that +10 hit points, so again coming back to my set of dice here, so here's a +5, and by the way, quick tip about dice. So 6-sided dice, the one side and the opposite side add up to 7. It was a long time before I knew that. So I know that this side is also a 5, right? So altogether that adds up to 10. So I can go ahead and use this. Now I actually don't put it on this card, although that would certainly work. I usually put it on the villain's dial tracker. And then once I get rid of the Immortal Claw, once I defeat the Immortal Claw, then I get rid of these dice as well. So this doesn't cover every single tool that I use, but hopefully it gives you an idea of the types of things a person might do in order to track things to minimize the mistakes. I don't think you're ever going to get to the point where you never make this type of mistake, and don't be hard on yourself if you do. everybody, even I certainly my mistakes have been minimized to a large degree now, but I still make mistakes. And if I did, and at the end of the game I realize I did, oh well, just I'd let the game stand as it stands. Everybody have a good one. I'll see you next time. Or at least talk to you next time.